complex.
Randy, I'll tell you, I want to point out one thing here as we look at the bottom here. There is any one of these tiles. If one of those tiles comes out, it doesn't take much to cause a serious problem. Those tiles are, can be held in your hand. One tile in the wrong place can cause a real problem, can it? Being lost, that is.
That is correct. The tiles on the bottom, the black tiles, and the gray leading edge surface called reinforced carbon-carbon, the very high temperature leading edge of the wing and up on the nose cap, are very critical to the performance and control of the vehicle. There's another important point. The orbiter has been coming through the atmosphere, taking on a tremendous heat load, and if any lateral maneuvers, the banking to the left, the banking to the right, are conducted, and this is part of the normal flight profile, but what that does, it adds an instantaneous large heat load in addition to the heat that's already been put into the orbiter as a capacitive heat load. And so if you have any flight controls issues where you go laterally too far to the left, too far to the right, there's a limit at what a banking rate can be safely conducted.
Right. But it's worth pointing out here, Randy, that at this juncture, the commander is not actually hand flying the vehicle. This is flown on autopilot. The only time that the commander actually takes control is on the very final stages of approach, once it goes subsonic, about 50,000 feet, just before turning in for landing at the Kennedy Spacer. This is all controlled by computer.
That is correct, and STS-3 was one of the very first and only landings where automatic landing was conducted, but the normal flight entry into the atmosphere is computer-driven and controlled. And of course, there's the manual capability that both the left seat and the right seat, commander and pilot, have. And the 50,000-foot altitude is directly over the shuttle landing facility in Florida or in California. And then a 270-degree turn to the left or right on the heading alignment circle is conducted to bring it on the final approach, which includes an approach, a pre-flare and flare and touchdown and rollout.
And it's amazing how precipitous it is from that point, about 6 times steeper than a commercial airliner's approach, 17, 18 degrees versus 3 degrees. Let me ask you this, these banking maneuvers, they are controlled by computers on board the space shuttle. It is not required for the space shuttle to have communication with Earth in order to accomplish that goal. In other words, it's kind of uploaded. The shuttle is an autonomous craft, correct?
That is correct, and during reentry, the physics that's taking place, the atmosphere is ionizing, stripping off electrons, and an electromagnetic plasma is formed around the orbiter, blocking transmission of, for example, UHF radio transmission. So it's typically the well-known blackout period, loss of signal, loss of communications. And as I was watching the reentry today, there was no acquisition of comm or navigation data.
Well, and Randy, it's worth pointing out that typically with the satellite communication that the shuttle now has with the TDRS, Tracking and Data Relay Satellite, you don't even see that so much anymore, or hadn't seen those blackout periods like you had in the earlier days of the shuttle.
Yes, you're referring to the on-orbit operations and the network of TDRS satellites. By the way, TDRS was the main cargo in the 51L Challenger vehicle back in 1986. And this network is for on-orbit operations, communications from the orbiter to the Earth and vice versa, or from the orbiter to the space station or other orbiters, if you have, say, for example, 2 orbiters in orbit at the same time.
And I just want to point out to our viewers, we've been telling you about a briefing from NASA, from the shuttle program manager, Ron Dittemore, the chief flight director, Milt Heflin, out of Houston. Obviously, there you go, there's a live signal from NASA TV. 2:20 Central, 3:20 Eastern Time. We're about 2 minutes away. We'll bring it to you live as it happens. Randy, the issue of reentry and it's the dynamic pressure on the vehicle, is that as much stress as it encounters throughout the whole course of a flight, or does that happen on launch?
Well, the orbiter structure is limited by design to 650 pounds per square foot on the actual applied load of the atmosphere. That's for boost to orbit and reentry, but you also have the thermal effects of boost to orbit, which is considerable, and the very considerable heat loads during reentry. Both the aerodynamic pressure loads and the thermal loads have to be combined in analysis to determine what kind of stress the vehicle is experiencing. And plus, different payload configurations that may be inside the payload bay have an effect on the total mass and the flight response of the vehicle.
We're getting into some fairly deep technical waters here. We hope we aren't losing people on all the technicalities of this, but as we go through this, I guess we'll all be schooled in a lot of this to some extent, just as we all became schooled in what an O-ring does and how, when it is cold, it doesn't perform as it should. Once again, just tell us what's going on inside NASA right now, what the process is. We talked about preserve.
As I was telling you, looks a little like part of the heat shield. If we've got time, I'm going to bring one of the locals in here. Jerry Schultz, come to me. You tell me that you got a frantic call from your daughter today saying, Dad, come over quick. What did she tell you?
Well, she said she had something that fell in her backyard and called authorities. They come out, and I just went out and looked at it. And to me, it looks like part of the heat shield. It still has some like 7-inch squares on it.
And did the authorities come out and rope it off, or did they just tell you to leave it alone? Or
they roped it off and just told they'd be back in touch.
Well, and you're not.
There's 3 different pieces in the field.
And you don't think people here are going to want to keep these for souvenirs, right? They want to help the authorities gather as much of this stuff as they can.
I think so. On the way out there, I see people walking in their pastures. You know, everybody's out looking, trying to see what they can find.
I saw a lot of debris coming in the past 20 miles. In your pasture and stuff, describe what you're seeing to me. Are you seeing many particles?
One of them was like a 2x3 sheet. It was part of the heat shield, and it had a little probe sticking out of it with electronic mechanism on the back.
All my neighbors in Dallas this morning heard big booms. How about here? What did it sound like here?
Definitely. It shook the walls.
Okay. Well, Peter, right now what you've got is many of the people of Nacogdoches, there's a university here, have come down. Some are laying flowers here. There's the main church in town is here, and some people are saying a few prayers. Most seem to want to cooperate. They want to help authorities gather as much of this as they can. I know the investigation, they want to get as many pieces. I mentioned to you earlier that some people had mistakenly taken parts home and were calling in radio stations to say, I can read you the serial number off the back of this. Is that going to help? And the word they're trying to get out is don't take it home, leave it where it is. But there are so many pieces, I don't know how they're going to get it all.
Thank you, Mike. Very much indeed, Mike von Frem in Nacogdoches. But you know, human nature...
to match what they be portraying. If you want to be unified and have love, that means that you're supposed to love everyone.
The headstone stretched across the sky of the shuttle, the smoke and vapor trails.
Have an occasion like this to speak to
what it is. People either have taken bits and pieces home and will return it to the authorities. We've heard that from various people phoning in with serial numbers on the individual heat shields because that's so essential. Some tiles have more value than others, we're told, and others, of course. Putting it or not putting it may be a scam, who knows? Putting it on eBay. We were talking a moment ago about the fact, we've talked many times today, about the fact that this was a scientific shuttle in so many ways.
Across any debris at all. Any piece, no matter how small a piece, how large a piece, leave it alone. Call 911, let your local authorities know where it is, the location, what you see, but don't go up and touch it. As you pointed out earlier, Miles, and it's very important for people to understand this, that there are a lot of toxic substances that could be on those pieces of debris, residue, those kind of things. And it's spread over a large territory. We're talking possibly Texas, Arizona, Oklahoma, Louisiana, New Mexico, Miles. And right now, about 3 hours ago, after the Federal Bureau of Investigation, their headquarters put out an alert to all of their 56 field offices, putting all of their agents who are members of the evidence response team on standby, should they be needed to...
In Florida, it's supposed to be horizontal. Now, whether 57 degrees was off, I don't know. I think...
And they will coordinate with local, state, and federal law enforcement, federal, state, and local law officials around that whole vicinity, as well as the military. We know already that there are some reserve units out there. We just saw Ed Lavandera's report from Texas, where we do see some military personnel out there securing the scenes. So it's a coordinated effort with the Federal Emergency Management Agency as the lead agency for these recovery efforts. Miles?
You know, it's, as we send it over to Nick Furman, who's sitting beside you there, Mike, Not only is this potentially dangerous, but wouldn't it be a terrible shame if somebody decided to take, in a sick way, take a souvenir, and perhaps that's the piece that could have solved the puzzle?
That's exactly right. You know, and I want to stress this to our viewers, don't let your ghoulish curiosity get the best of you. Yes, you know, this is a very important thing. These aren't souvenirs. This is evidence.